On March 23, 2020, NBC News published an article about a couple in their 60s who ingested chloroquine phosphate in the form of fish tank cleaner in an attempt to prevent themselves from getting the coronavirus. The husband died, and the woman was in urgent care when she gave her interview to NBC. This article was subject to heavy criticism from certain right-wing groups, and the surviving wife was subject to intense scrutiny. Why? Well, some believe that she intentionally murdered her husband. One of the proponents of this theory is Steven Crowder, a YouTuber with over 4.4 million subscribers. He actually went as far as to call one of the original authors of the NBC article. We are going to examine that phone call, and I'm going to expose how Steven Crowder will lie and deceive in order to craft his narrative. Before we go over the phone call itself, I'd like to go over this title, notably the part that says, "From leftist star to homicide case." There is no homicide case. National Review only reported that it was being investigated as a homicide because the detectives looking into the death were homicide detectives, which appears damning until you read this NBC article that actually got a statement from the police department clarifying, "This investigation is not being treated as a homicide. The death of has not been ruled a homicide at this time." Flam said the department's homicide unit is involved because it investigates all reported deaths within the city of Mesa, from deaths related to car accidents to the elderly in hospice. And that article came out long before Crowder's video, so this marks the very first lie. Now, the phone call itself starts 9 minutes and 6 seconds into the full video if you'd like to watch the whole thing yourself. I'm going to skip the introductions of the call, except for this part.
Hi, Erica Edwards, Steven Crowder calling. How are you?
I know it doesn't seem like it, but that is going to be important later. Oh, also this part.
Well, I'm calling because I'm actually writing a story here, and I have some information from an anonymous source that I want to keep anonymous. And I know that you guys over there, obviously discretion is pretty important. It's regarding the woman.
This mention of an anonymous source literally never comes up again, and as we'll later learn, that source is the internet.
The story originally that was published, stated that she drank fish tank cleaner, and obviously, sadly, her husband died. And there's an interview that was posted where she said she did it because she saw it from a Trump press conference, correct?
So that right there was a lie that he's going to build his other arguments on top of. She did not say that she did it because she saw it in a Trump press conference. They asked her if she had seen the press conference, and she said yes. That's it. Play the clip.
Did you see the president's press conference? Where did you hear about?
Yeah, we saw his press conference. It was on a lot, actually.
That exchange, when referenced in the article, turned into this. The man's wife told NBC News she'd watched televised briefings during which President Trump talked about the potential benefits of chloroquine. The idea of cause and effect was at the very most implied, though not directly stated, by the authors, not the lady. And Crowder should know this. That piece of audio I used as evidence just there, he played that in the beginning of his video, and yet somehow didn't come to the same conclusion.
She said she did it because she saw it from a Trump press conference, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Just in case anyone sees this as the author conceding grounds to Crowder, I'd just like to point out that it's not her job to find and correct for every factual misstep of her callers. This isn't a debate, and considering Crowder lives in a single-party consent state, she probably doesn't even know this call is going to become a segment.
Yes.
Okay. And then she did say that she trusted him and that no one should do the same. I have the article up right here.
This is where we're going to pause for a bit. That quote he's referencing isn't even from the article, it's just part of the longer audio interview.
Did you at any point hear that the FDA had not approved of it for coronavirus purposes, or?
Yes. But, they kept saying that it was approved for other things, and, Trump kept saying it was, basically pretty much a cure.
What would be your message to the American public?
Oh my God, don't take anything. Don't believe anything don't believe anything the president says and his people, because they don't know what they're talking about.
The idea Crowder is trying to set up here is that in this quote, she's lying about her motivation for taking the drug. The argument is that she's a Democrat who hates Trump, therefore she would never take his medical advice on anything. Now, this idea of a concealed motive leads people like Crowder and others to seek the true motive, which for them is that she wanted her husband dead. But maybe if we want to be more certain about her motivation, it would be useful to have another quote from her. After all, in this one, she only gives Trump as her second stated reason for taking the drug, and she still hasn't outright said that she's a Trump supporter. I mean, Crowder insists that she's being deceptive to the media, so maybe somewhere else she clarifies her position on why she took the drug, and maybe she does lie and say, yes, I am a Trump supporter. Let's look at her interview with the Washington Free Beacon. Told the Free Beacon that she and her husband were both Democrats, not Trump supporters. They heard about the potential benefits of chloroquine, an anti-malarial drug, in news reports. We weren't big supporters of Trump, but we did see they were using it in China and stuff, told the Free Beacon, and we just made a horrible, tragic mistake. So, as we go forward, just keep in mind that so far we have no reason to believe that she lied about her political leanings or her motivation.
Up right here. I wanted to know, since you know, were you aware of the fact that she was you must be a prolific Democratic donor?
I'm sorry?
Did you guys, you know her name, and obviously it's public record. Most people don't have a name because I understand it's anonymous, and rightfully so.
I didn't say her name, but I don't understand what your question is.
No, you didn't say her name, but I'm just saying I know her name. I was just confirming that way I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. So you know the woman in question.
We'll get to her donations in a second, but this is where I'm going to call out Crowder for pretending like he wants to keep her name confidential by constantly bleeping it out of his video, but then includes her first and last name in various locations all over his graphics.
We made sure to try and redact all the names. I obviously don't want to dox anyone. No. So please, nobody out there try and dox or figure anything out.
Well, so much for that. But why does he do this? Why does he say it's so important to keep her name secret, but doesn't actually do it himself? I think it comes down to this line.
Most people don't have a name because I understand it's anonymous, and rightfully so.
It seems he wants people to think that their names aren't yet public information so that he looks like a more authoritative source by knowing them. But that statement is a lie. Crowder suggests this call took place sometime between his April 3rd and his April 6th show. On March 31st, Liberty Headlines published an article with their full names. So by the time of these segments, their names were leaked and public. Now, he could have done an honorable thing and not spread around that information against the wishes of the lady, but instead he shows not only their first and last names, but segments of her middle initial and her date of birth. Classy.
And obviously you guys do great journalism there at NBC News, so I wanted to know if you had discovered, if you came upon this information or can confirm that she is a Democratic donor who gave to Hillary in 2016 and repeatedly throughout her lifetime.
I don't know any...
Okay, I'm going to be pedantic here. To say she gave repeatedly throughout her lifetime is a bit of a stretch, considering that $150 donation she gave to Hillary Clinton in 2016 is literally her first political donation on record. Why am I being pedantic? It's because either Crowder is willing to embellish the truth in order to suit his political narrative, or I just know more about this than he does. I honestly believe it's only the first one, but either way, it doesn't bode well for him.
I don't know anything that's not even relevant to the story, quite frankly.
Well, isn't it relevant because she said that she did it because Trump told her to, and there are multiple sources here that show she was virulently anti-Trump as an activist for a long time. So it seems peculiar that she would all of a sudden decide to take medical advice from Donald Trump when she also gave to pro-science, anti-right-wing, anti-science ideology, as it's stated here, nonprofits.
Okay. Do you have a question for me? I mean, this sounds like it's your story.
Well, I am asking if you knew this when you posted the story, because it seems like it would be pretty relevant, no? that someone went out there saying no one should trust President Trump, and she's
I think that you have a specific story that you're trying to tell, and that's totally cool.
No, see, I think that you did. I think that either you didn't do your due diligence.
Maybe if someone were following along with Crowder's version of events where she lies about being a Trump supporter, then her donations to Democrats would be relevant information. But the article doesn't claim that she's a Trump supporter. She doesn't claim in the article that she's a Trump supporter. So, this literally isn't relevant information. It doesn't contradict anything in the article. Please, go read the article. I have, 20 times. I find it strange that Crowder is still pushing this idea that Trump was her sole motivation for taking the drug. Why? Well, you know that Washington Free Beacon article I mentioned earlier? The one where she goes more in depth into her reasoning for taking the drug. Well, that article was actually the first article that came out about her donation history to Democrats. You'd think Crowder or someone on his team would have read that and seen the more in-depth explanation. I guess they missed it, or they're just ignoring it.
Your due diligence. Also, let me move on here. Are you aware about the assault case with her husband? That she mentioned divorcing her husband? Because this is a totally separate instance here. We're not talking about politics, but she openly wanted to divorce her husband, and we found the court documents of her being charged with assault against her husband, who died from drinking the fish tank cleaner. Were you aware of that?
The assault charge? It was 19 years ago, and she was found not guilty. Even if she did do it, we're talking about someone whom we have no evidence has done anything violent in almost 20 years.
I think that you have a story there that you should go with. That's not my
Well, let me
story,
ask, since you published the original story,
I say Godspeed to you.
would you be willing to correct the story since this is relevant information? Do you not see it as relevant information that a woman who went out saying she did something because she was a supporter of Trump, when we know that she's not, and she couldn't stand her husband? I have the evidence. I can send it to you. Would that be relevant? Would you like to care? I don't have a big news outlet. That's the thing. I have this information.
I know he's only saying he doesn't have a news outlet to build up this idea that the NBC article author might be willing to hide evidence from the public by denying his story. But, he introduced himself as Steven Crowder, and he has quite a distinctive voice. So, he didn't set up that play very well. And you've got to think, right? If this lady has, at this point in the call, already figured out that, yes, this is Steven Crowder with 4.4 million subscribers, and his own news website, louderwithcrowder.com, then, well, he just lied to her. And, maybe now she doesn't trust anything else he says either.
I have corroborated it 100% with authorities. I would love to get it to you because I would love to see the truth get out here because, as we know, as journalists, it's very important. It's your story. You can take it. I don't want the credit. I just want to make sure the truth is out there. And I can send you all of this evidence.
If you would, I think that you have a story to tell, and I wish you good luck.
I think you have the truth to tell here, and I would like to provide it to you, NBC News. Do you understand that this is the definition of fake news at this point? I can provide you evidence right now that she was...
Well,
very upset. By the way, it should be noted, we sent this email, I think we have a screenshot, to both her and the co-writer with verification, corroboration of the evidence, and no response.
So before you judge this author for willfully ignoring evidence, you have to realize what Crowder is asking of her. He's asking her to insert into her article certain pieces of evidence that would, in effect, pretty much accuse the woman of murder. And there's more important context here. Crowder pretends like he has this exclusive information that he is bringing to NBC News so it can finally be made public. But at the time of this phone call, all this information was already publicly available, and not through Crowder. You can see in his follow-up email to NBC that most of the links to his evidence are literally just the first thing that would have come up if you were to Google her name before this whole incident occurred. And that last piece of evidence, the one he says isn't publicly available, had already been leaked on Twitter days before. My point is, if you wanted to see this supposed evidence of homicide, you didn't have to go to Crowder for it. It was literally all over the internet. And the evidence isn't very compelling once you look at it. The next piece of evidence is supposed to be absolute proof that she would never self-medicate without seeking a doctor's opinion. That proof? 16 years ago, she went to see a doctor for migraines. Then, 15 years ago, she went to see another couple doctors for unbearable stress and anxiety. 15 years ago. And that's supposed to prove that today, for a completely unrelated medical situation, she would definitely consult a doctor. The last piece of evidence is that 8 years ago, she was very mad and wanted to divorce her husband. I've seen some sources dig really deep into these documents saying, well, she might have abused alcohol, which she denies, and she took lots of sleeping pills to get rid of her nightmares. I feel like at that point we've just strayed so far from the fact that the core tenets of this argument are built on lies, and they're just trying to grasp at straws, trying to find any form of untoward behavior in order to justify their accusations. I'd also like to point out Crowder's hypocrisy because as I examined the NBC article, the only misstep I could find was that they implied that the lady's motivation for taking the drug was simpler than it was. And Crowder took that, added a little flavor to it, snowballed it up into a giant ball of outrage. Meanwhile, he, on his show, without consulting the EMTs of the case or the people in the hospital or really anyone else, implies that maybe she didn't even take the drug and she just poisoned her husband by himself and she lied about being sick.
She wanted to divorce him. She clearly hated Trump, and only her husband died? I think he was having his evening Manhattan and didn't realize that it was mixed with a little bit of koi food. Queen lady, the lady who drank fish tank cleaner. Okay, the lady who drank fish tank cleaner, and she said she drank fish tank cleaner.
That's true.
Her husband most definitely drank fish tank cleaner.
That seems like much, much more of a case of
journalistic malpractice
than what he accuses them of. Even the right-wing website Liberty Headlines, during their attempts to endorse the homicide theory, exposed possibly the most concrete proof that this speculation by Crowder is almost certainly wrong. Detective Jason Flam, public information officer for the Mesa Police Department, said that after ingesting the poisonous chloroquine phosphate solution, and her husband had spoken to the police and acknowledged doing it intentionally. Prior to being transported to the hospital, and clearly stated what they had done. In conclusion, Steven Crowder and people like him will cry foul at straw men of their opponents, lying through their teeth in order to craft their own narrative. Why? Well, because NBC can't just be seen as a news outlet with some bias that has to be weighed against others to get the full picture. No, they have to be seen as completely untrustworthy, completely unworthy of any attention at all. Because if someone were to actually read the article in question and compare it to Crowder's framing, well, they'd see something fishy is going on. I know that joke was probably in poor taste, but, that fish tank cleaner can't have tasted that good either.